We're talking with former Ohio Machine head coach Bear Davis. Bear, I want to ask you a strange question that has nothing to do with lacrosse. You're one of the few guys that was a full-time coach, and this really a full-time employee in what was then the MLL in 15, 16, and 17, 2000. You were the director of ticket sales for the Ohio Machine. Now, my question is, what's the worst job and what's the worst part of being I can only think of a ticket manager of always everybody ringing phone looking for free tickets. Can you explain what that was like and what that was as far as the Ohio Machine was concerned? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, myself, Dave Cottle was full-time as the president of the Bayhawks, but really outside of us two, there really was no one else doing what we were doing. So of course, Coach Cottle and I had a lot of conversations about, doing, the Bayhawks did a really good job, with sponsorship and their ticket sales. They also have a lot of tournaments in the area. They had a lot of opportunity, to partner up with different groups. And, lacrosse being a bigger, just a bigger entity and they weren't swallowed by the Ohio State logo, Blue Jackets and crew. And, they just didn't have that competition. So that was, that was interesting, of course, that aspect. But as far as like my role, I was into ticketing my first couple of years. Well, I started off as a part-time, or a contracted head coach. So I was flying in from Annapolis.
Right.
And I didn't work in the front office, but then my first, when I became full-time, I was VP of, ticketing, and I oversaw the ticket sales team. Then later I moved into the community outreach, where we're doing more of what I'm doing now with, the youth lacrosse movement and supporting, a convention and all those things. But, the ticketing part is tough. People don't understand, like, you're competing with everything that anybody wants to do during the summer. You're and your lacrosse bases, they're at tournaments, they're doing things. So, you're competing with, Diamond Dog Night at freaking, the Columbus Clippers game. You're competing with the Columbus Zoo. You're competing with, because, the way we was like, people only have so much funds to spend on summer fun. Like a family of four or whatever, they're going to look at it and say, this is how much money we have. And then how do you get them to carve out a pool of that money to come watch lacrosse? And, a lot of their, quote unquote, lacrosse money goes towards their kid playing on, in a tournament or a camp or, so they're like, well, we bought a stick and we went to this tournament. Well, there's all the money that we have towards, lacrosse. I learned a ton, I honestly, for me, it was an incredible experience to just, expand my horizons. And, I've been an athletic director, and now I've been on the side of, ticket sales. I've been involved with sponsorship packages. Just me as a person, I think those experiences helped me grow a ton, as just administrator, someone that just wants to know how business works.
You have to know all aspects, but I think of in the wintertime, I spend 100 days a year on snow because I'm a race coach for ski racing. And I get 4, maybe 5 casual days where I can go out and ski with poles in my hand. And people that I know that are in the business of recreation spend less time recreating at the sport that they're involved in as owners than they did when they were, just recreational, enjoyment kind of folk. And the reality to it is, it becomes a full-time gig. I was just curious because I would think the phone would keep ringing. I want to follow up, and I don't want to get in a whole depth on the thing, but 2019, the Ohio Machine closed their doors, and it was, I don't want to say it was abrupt, but is there still some, you've been quoted as always saying, look forward, but is there still a little bit of sting left from what happened in 19?
I don't believe that's something that you'll ever completely get over, I felt like, it's like, it was our baby, and it was something that we had built, we worked hard, or we had a really solid front office, a lot of people that cared. We have, we had fans that cared. We had, we have a stadium, we're cutting edge of pro lacrosse at the time. We're doing conventions with 500, you attended. We have 500 people there. We're a staple in the community of lacrosse, and we're working with inner city kids. We're, there's just so many positives to it. And then to have that, removed, was, it was a pretty good sting to it, and I don't know if it's something that, I'll ever 100% get over, but, with that being said, all the positives that we were doing, a lot of those things we were able to carry over. And, I just said, hey, like you said, just got to move forward. Right. So we started Urban Lacrosse Academy, which our president of the Ohio Machine, I, talked to him, and he was the president of our board. And a lot of people that sat on our Ohio Machine Foundation transferred over and are now on our, our Urban Lacrosse Academy board. So we're still doing initiatives in the city. All Ohio Lacrosse is basically, we took the events that we were doing that were pretty cool and unique and helped grow the game here. And we just moved all those assets over to All Ohio Lacrosse. So it's just that trials and tribulation of figuring out how do we transfer at least what we're doing in the community over and keep those positive movements moving forward. But as far as like just having access to pro players and growing the game here in Columbus and doing it right, I felt like we're doing it, right. And, to not have that anymore is pretty tough.
As director of outreach, while you're with the machine, you pulled together a convention that was well attended. 500, 600, 800 people would show up to your convention every year. And it was really different than the U.S. Lacrosse Convention, because I think it wasn't just sitting in a chair and listening to guys talk about X's and O's. It was a much greater experience, at least from what I've been to both. How did that start, and what was the impetus for getting it off the ground?
Yeah, so years ago, and I know you're friends with Billy, Wolford, and he was on my staff. It was one of those things where when I moved back from Maryland to coach the machine, I had been away from Ohio for a long time, quite frankly, just coaching college and doing things. And when I was just leaving Ohio, I can recall a time where, Ohio took a bus, met in Columbus or whatever. And the Coaches Association would take a bus to the U.S. Lacrosse, convention. And they had a suite, and, the guys would hang out, and, Coach Bresci, all the Ohio college coaches, whatever. It was a strong foundation, a good fraternity of good people sharing knowledge and growing the game. When I came back, Billy said that has been fragmented, the growth and the competitive level, and people just don't have time for that. And I was like, that's a shame, because I feel like that's really how we grew the game in Ohio in those early years, was with supporting each other. It wasn't necessarily, competing against one another. That definitely does, but supporting the growth of the game. So that's when I said, well, let's bring a convention here. And, it's so expensive to take your staff, like if you want to take your youth coaches all the way to JV, middle school, whatever, to the U.S. Lacrosse Convention, who can afford that? Like that's a small fortune. So, it was like that, taking that similar process and putting it in the Midwest, allowing people to bring their youth coaches and trying to, even the women's coaches, and we also had our high school leadership program, where you can bring players, and they can attend the leadership program. So it was really an all encompassing thought process of how can we help people build their whole program, head to toe, and bring in the quality coaches to speak to them. The other thing was there's a little bit of a fragment of disconnect between the local college coaches and the high school coaches. So it's like bringing them together. And that's where I always thought the lunch was vital, like breaking bread with people and just, outside of the classroom and just catching up with different people and meet, I think that was as vital as anything that we did. I mean, the last year, obviously we had to stop there. All Ohio Lacrosse took it over, and we're excited about it. We were still able to maintain some good momentum with it. It's kind of interesting because the concept we were going to come up with before COVID was doing almost like the speed dating concept for lunch,
Right.
like do it like speed coaching, where we had our different speakers sitting at different tables, and it's like 10 minutes, at a time, where you can get up and go sit with different coaches and, pick their brains during lunch and just have, meet them. We thought that might be unique, cool, instead of doing like a round table where it's more personable and 1-on-4, 1-on-5. And, so it's just always trying to think outside the box and how we can connect the community in the game.
you now live in Columbus. Do you think Columbus? I've always had great respect for Columbus, the way they've operated. I think Ohio State has as good of facilities as anybody in the country. We love coming to that part of the world to play and compete. The officiating is better there than it is here by a lot. And my question to you is do you think Columbus now or ever was it, you can compare it to Central New York, compare it to Long Island, compare it to maybe Denver? You think they're there? Or do you still think they're? I think of Michigan being behind in terms of the Columbus, maybe 5 years. You think Columbus is still one of those hotbeds, or is continued to be a hotbed?
Well, yeah, it's yeah, I think it's good lacrosse. Like even when I was at Archbishop Spalding, we had Kilbourne was coming down there and playing us. Teddy had Upper Arlington coming down and playing us. There's just a good brand of kid, a big, strong, tough Midwest kid, and now some of these schools have forged great relationships with the football program. They're getting a football kid out, and look at the college lacrosse landscape. You're seeing the Columbus kid, playing, at high levels. I would say that, one of the things that's unique to here comparatively maybe to some other states is the mixing of public and private schools within the divisions. I would say that some of the private schools in Ohio have done an incredible job of finding the right coaches, which is attracting and pulling, those kids to the programs. So it's getting harder. It's not getting easier for the public school. Our private schools in Columbus are strong. Some of them are a little smaller, but when you look at the St. X's, the Mollers, St. Ignatius, St. Ed's, I mean, those are big private, schools in the Cleveland and Cincinnati areas. And our private schools are a little bit smaller, St. Charles and DeSales, which, DeSales competes at the Division II level, but their whole schedule is a Division I schedule. Just a smaller school. So that is the unique dynamic that you see, and in Columbus at least. But the Jeromes, Upper Arlingtons, Double Kaufmans. I mean, they're Liberty right now, Old Tangy Liberty. I mean, there's just a lot of strong, athletes, just horses, some kids that can play at high levels. So yeah, compared it to other areas, I think that kind of comes and goes, like each year you get a special group that comes through, whether that group played on a certain club team and they all, had some great success, and then they go back to their high school teams. All of a sudden you're like, wow, these 4 or 5 programs were really good. And it's because maybe that group, collectively had some superior box. I think the box game in Columbus is changing things. Got, some superior box opportunities in the winter. Stick skills are just getting better and better. As you see in Colorado, their box is growing tremendously as well. So yeah, there's some certain aspects that I feel are helping it, stay and become even more competitive.
Welcome back to season 2, show number 46. We're talking with former Ohio Machine and Robert Morris head coach Bear Davis. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Bear, I want to start with the first and most obvious question. Your given name is Kenneth, and a lot of folks might think Bear comes from something related to hunting or being a great athlete, but actually it came from your mom. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd like to tell and maybe lie and tell someone I wrestled a bear, on a camping trip when I was a youngster, but the story's not that cool.
Yeah.
No, my mom, I was a big baby, so my name, real name is Kenneth, and she called me Kenny the Pooh Bear. My baby room was filled with Pooh Bear stuff. So she's like, then later on she just dropped the whole Kenny and then just stuck with Bear. So I've been called that my whole life, and I guess it's one of those things where you don't really think about it, anymore because you've been called that your whole life. And so I was like, wow, Bear, that's a weird name. I was like, well, I don't know. It's not that weird to me. I've been called my whole life. So.
Does anybody call you Ken or Kenny?
My third grade teacher called me that. I think Mrs. Steinmetz, never forget her. I think she said, someday when you get to college, you get your job, they're going to call you Ken. So you just get used to it now. And, here I am, 47, Mrs. Steinmetz. I'm sorry. It's never really happened.
I think of being a coach, Bear is such a cool name, but if you were a chiropractor or something, just name
Yeah.
sort of. I think of some of these athletes that there was a wide receiver at Michigan. His name was Rocket Morris, and just how do you name your son Rocket? And it turns out to be a Mercury Morris, or whatever his name was. Sometimes the names fit the physicality of what. So Bear apparently is a great name. When did you pick up a stick for the first time?
Well, we had I ran track and played baseball and did all those kind of things here in Hilliard when I was growing up. Just because we did not have lacrosse, or lacrosse was something that the Arlington and Worthington kids did here in Columbus, and not the Hilliard kids. We had a math teacher that was also a wrestling coach. He came from Michigan State, and then we had a couple of kids that moved in from different schools. Like one came over from like maybe Wellington, one of the private schools next here. But anyways, they had played before. So there was like there was some sticks floating around the school. There was someone that could possibly coach. And next thing you know, these 2 or 3 guys went to Coach Smith Patterson, who started the program, and said, "Hey, can you coach us?" And he's like, "Sure." And then the athletic director, Kurt Hansen, at the time was supportive. He had a lacrosse background as well. But I was in 8th grade, and then actually, Smith was a wrestling coach, so he had recruited all of us as 8th graders, like that were coming up, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be starting this lacrosse program," and he just told us all to go get sticks. We all got sticks, and I don't know what this is, and next thing you know, we're playing lacrosse.
What position did you play? Curious.
So I played defense. That was inflicting pain was that's all I knew about the game. I was like, wait, if you give me this pull and I can beat up this guy running around with the ball, I was like, it sounds like a good time to me. Let's go. Would
Meat Squad be a part of that discussion if we were describing your team?
Yeah, I would say that was we definitely were not of the skilled type back then. Say Goon Squad was probably pretty much up our alley.
So a football player playing lacrosse versus a guy playing lacrosse.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I learned way more about the game after my high school playing days, once I really got into it.
From Ohio, you ended up at Wilmington College?
Yes. Yeah, went down to Wilmington. We
where is that?
Wilmington's just south of Columbus here, but they there's 30, probably a lot more now, but at the time there's 36 teams in the state of Ohio that was playing NCAA football. So if you played football, you pretty much got recruited to play football. There's probably 5 or 6 teams, maybe 7 that played lacrosse. But if you played lacrosse in Ohio and you weren't from Arlington or Western Reserve Academy or Worthington, you weren't getting recruited, and that was, so I went that route to go play football and enjoyed my time doing that for sure.
Now, the startings of your career and the way you've operated your career, you started the club lacrosse program at Wilmington. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was some unique opportunities, came up where I actually coached wrestling at Wilmington High School and became really good friends with the athletic director. And it just worked out. I had a couple of buddies on campus that had played lacrosse, and we were playing men's club. We were driving to Cincinnati in the spring, and we were just playing on the Cincinnati men's club, Mount Adams, and some of those teams. And then, those guys were all coaches, and they said, "Wait, why don't you start a lacrosse team at the, at the high school up there?" Since I was already in the high school coaching wrestling, it worked out really well. I also needed 6 credit hours to graduate. So I worked it out with my professors. This was actually the second year I had the program that I was able to get 6 credit hours through working and coaching the team. Then I was also student taught at the school. So I was pretty ingrained at Wilmington High School. It wasn't like I just walked in the door and people didn't know who I was. I was Coach Bear through wrestling, and then I was student teaching there. And I was actually the principal got me a maintenance job. I was doing all the lines. I painted all the lines. I did all deliveries for, like paper and all that from the central office. It was a really cool, unique learning opportunity for me to work from the inside out.
Your degree is in history and education. Did you know it early on you wanted to be a teacher, or was it more at the athletic administration?
I just like being around the schools. I felt like there's, you could be a positive. I had so many positive influences that I felt like that's something that I could do and give back. I enjoyed, my experience, with several coaches and good teachers. So I really didn't, and maybe a little bit also, I didn't know what else I could do. I was like, what else am I good at? Like I have no idea. So that route seemed to be the best route for me.
Were mom and dad in education either way?
No, my dad was a railroader, farmer. My mom was in the restaurant business, so it was, it was something different for sure.
You mentioned your third grade teacher. Was that an influence?
Oh man, she hammered me on the math and called me Kenneth. Yeah, no, I'll never forget her.
Was that the spark for the classroom wanting to be in it?
Actually it's kind of funny. I had a eighth grade history teacher, and we were in like the old high school, which some of these buildings unfortunately are gone, but he was in the boiler room down at this old, building that was the old Hilliard High School. And it was one of those things where in the winter, we'd have to open up the windows, and like snow would be coming in because it was so hot in there. But he was just had such energy and passion for teaching history, and he got us interested. And I was like, wow, like I always thought history was really boring, and just, read a book and regurgitate the test. But, I was like, there's other ways of teaching it. And Mr. Fisher was his name. He had such an incredible way of relaying the message and teaching it that it was just an inspiration for me. And then I joined like the Future Teachers of America Club and had some unique teachers that kind of worked with us there. And it's just, so I really was going down that path, when I was in high school.
All right. From Wilmington, you go to Wright State, you get your certificate to teach history. And how does you go from Wright State in 98 to Wheeling in 99? Take me down that road a little bit.
Yeah, so I ended up a few credits shy. Well, I actually did my student teaching through Wright State, so it worked out pretty good. Little cheaper school than Wilmington, but some great professors there. But that was my last year coaching at Wilmington High School. I was actually on the phones just trying to help my players, get college looks and opportunities, and I came across Marietta. And a couple of my players went down to visit, and I spoke to the head coach, who was an assistant football coach, and he had told me that he had a GA position open. So I spent a year at Marietta, and I took a couple of my players from Wilmington High School there with me. Did that, was a GA there for a year before the Wheeling opportunity came up. The head coaching position came up, and I interviewed, and I was like I think it was the fourth option for him, to be honest with you. Actually, they told me thanks, but no thanks. Which was kind of funny, and then I accepted the head coaching position at Marietta. I was offered that. And then I guess everybody that they interviewed turned it down, and there I was the fourth guy. They called me and said, hey, by the way, come back up for another interview. And you just never know, how things work out. So I took it.
How old were you when you took the job?
25.
25. Now is it fair to say they were in shambles when you got there?
It was a club program, and it was a very loose club. It wasn't like some of these MCLA clubs that you see. It's more of the NCL, Nickel, Beer League. I mean, some great guys. I mean, some great kids, but nothing, not necessarily guys that signed up to play varsity lacrosse by any means.
So was the idea to take it to a Division III NCAA level?
No, we were Division II. One of the reasons why I liked that over the Marietta opportunity was just a little more say. I had a little bit of scholarship money, a little more emphasis on lacrosse. Marietta was a Division III and the only OAC school, playing lacrosse at the time. And now the whole, conference has lacrosse, but and scheduling was very difficult there. Great school. Love Marietta. I'm glad they got it back. I'm excited for them, that they have their program back because they dropped it for a period there. But, Wheeling was Division II, transferring from a club, scenario to Division II. And, there wasn't high school lacrosse within 50 miles of, the campus. So it had its challenges, but we built a schedule and on a limited budget, and I hired some great assistants, some guys that help us recruit and do it right.
All right, you turned that program around and pointed in the right direction. So here's my question: what did you have that background? Was it sort of fumbling in the dark to learn? What changed, or what did you know about the program, and what did you learn about growing programs that nobody else wanted?
Well, that's a good question. I think just the desire and determination, to be out. Really through my experience at Wilmington doing the curriculum design, I had to do a whole curriculum design. I had to build it from the inside out. Again, just trying to, almost like my experience for the machine was just learning stuff that about the whole operation of building an event or a team or a program. And then my assistant, you have to, what you win with people, and you have to get the right kids in. We did steal a couple kids. What I mean by this, kids that probably shouldn't have been playing, Division II. And we got, we had Nick Asmo, a goalie from Upper Arlington, who was probably one of the best players in the Midwest Conference that year, but Wheeling was the right size, right fit, right distance from home. And, we took care of him. He came in and ended up being an All-American goalie for us. And, we had I had probably 7 of my kids that played for me at Wilmington High School that came, up there. So a lot of kids that were familiar with me and my style, and that made the transition pretty easy too. They're all great kids, that had, blue collar, hardworking mentality. So yeah, my assistant coaches were great. They were young, energetic, and really wanted to learn the game. And we challenged each other a lot, and pushed each other to become, better coaches.
Does Mark Greeny, does that name sound familiar from Wheeling? He's an Ann Arbor guy. Does Mark play for you?
Yeah, Greeny, I recruited Greeny. Unfortunately, I left. I never got the opportunity to coach Greeny, but he's definitely, I think, one of those model, type kids that we'd identified some talent that, like flew under the radar, quite frankly. A Michigan kid that can finish, and shoot the poo out of the ball, quite frankly. Like nobody really knew who Mark Greeny was, but he came to Wheeling and ended up, dominating.
He has about 30 of my high school kids in his program right now called PLG here in Ann Arbor. So it's been really fun getting to know him. When you're at Wheeling, is the lack of experience and maybe the sort of the blinders on when you're sort of building it, realizing that not knowing where you're headed, does that help a little bit with not worrying about making mistakes at that first time through?
I think probably I don't know if it's to a fault or, I've never let the most pressure I've ever had is just pressure on myself. I never really looked at, the administration or, whoever, because they were never going to put the more pressure on me than I was already putting on myself, to compete and build something. There's a drive, I think my wrestling, background and some of my coaches that I've had in football, just stealing from those guys and like the drive. When you're a wrestler, you're standalone, like there's nobody else to blame. There's no, it's just such a unique sport.
Well, I asked the question because we start with a club program at Wilmington, then we go to, you go to Wheeling and you kind of rebuild from there, which then gets you to your next opportunity at Robert Morris. And that, did you know at Wheeling that you wanted to make coaching a career? And then does that open the door then a little bit for Robert Morris, because you kind of started at scratch with that program, and you had the other 2 backgrounds with Wilmington and Wheeling of kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah. They were starting there. I interviewed at Bellarmine, believe it or not. It was Jack McKettrick, Tommy Mariano, it was a good friend of mine, and myself. We interviewed for that job, and then obviously Jack got that job, and then the Robert Morris job came open and interviewed there, and I just kept pushing, kept pushing. I wanted that job. It was just a unique opportunity. I like the Pittsburgh area, and I felt like we could do some good things there. Again, it was a shoestring budget. We didn't have a stadium. We had 2 quote unquote home games our first year. Neither one of them were on a home stadium of ours. So we had 0 home games that first year. We had a part-time assistant coach. We had maybe two and a half scholarships. So it was just one of those things where I would never do that again in my life. Like today, if you ask me, hey, you want to go take on a Division I program and here's the tools that you have, it's kind of interesting because Terry Foy and I were having some text messages going back and forth about startup programs and different things. I'm like, I just don't know if you can do that. Like, 15 years ago, the MAC was a 4 scholarship limit, and some of the coaches in the MAC were still, part-time. It's not a thing anymore, and that's why, and we weren't even able to compete with that when we, what we had at Robert Morris's first, 2 years. Then we got to CAA, which was like the MAC denied us to get into the conference. The AD told me like, oh, we're shoo-in for the MAC. There's schools from the NEC that are in the MAC. We're a shoo-in. Well, we weren't a shoo-in. We didn't get in.
Right.
Then we got a new AD, or unfortunately the AD who hired me, she passed away. She had cancer, which was, she's a lovely lady. She's perfect, but it's unfortunate. Dr. Hoffaker passed away. And then we had our softball coach, which in most cases the lacrosse coach would cringe, that the softball coach was about ready to become the AD. That wasn't the case. He was excellent. Dr. Coleman was amazing and very supportive, and he understood what we were up against, because he had coached, that we were in the CAA, and, he was giving us a knife and a gun. We had a knife walking into a gunfight. So we had to get a little more resources.
I think the landscape is a little flatter now in terms of equality for the 76 Division I teams across the country.
Well, I think what we're finding, and if you look across the board, like some of these, bigger name schools, name wise, I think it's tough, because if you look at some of these schools, there's just so much talent. The funnel is just so, it's like this, like there's 1 billion kids playing high school. Now the Canadian, kids just more understands the recruiting process more, and they're getting seen more. So you just can't get them all. You can't get all the talent. And then all it takes is someone, at a second tier, school, maybe not, one of your Power 5 schools, that can identify talent and give the kids a good experience and coach them up, and, use their scholarship money wisely, build a good staff. And it's being done. If you look at, look at like Coach Torpy at High Point and some of these other programs, but they had 12, 12-6 scholarships. They had 2 full-time assistant coaches, stadium. Like, they still have everything you need to compete.
Right.
But, still the Dukes of the world, the Virginias, Notre Dames, they are getting that top level, kid that, that some of those schools will never get. Unfortunately, it's just like one of those things where, you're just going to walk in, Long Island, like, yeah, we want that kid and that kid. And it's just not that easy for, a High Point or a Robert Morris or, some of that nature.
I think coaching is 2 venues. I think it's X's and O's and understanding the game. And I think it's organizational chaos and being able to manage all that chaos. And there's really 2 different things as a head coach. And I think it's the 10,000 hours you got to put your time in to understand why it becomes easier as you move along. Did you learn your X's and O's at Morris when you were there? Is that where you picked up most of what you think you know?
I think it's been just a collective journey. I love spending my time with like Billy Wolford. I know you spent a lot of time with him at Notre Dame camp, but Bill's been coaching for 100 years, and you'll never see coach without a pen and paper.
Right.
And he's always writing down drills. He's always writing down. He's always, and he'll ask questions. And I think he's an inspiration to younger coaches. Wow, here's a guy that's been doing this game for a million years. He's still asking questions. I still to this day just love jumping on the phone. Like I went down a couple years ago and stayed with Coach, with Lars, Tiffany, and he was so gracious to invite me, to stay at his house and then go to practices, and we hung out. And I've known him for a long time, but just like. Not only the opportunity to watch his team practice and, watch the drills, but to go back and have lunch and talk about those drills. What are you getting out of this? What do you like about this? And then, he'd ask me, like, what do you think? We went back and forth, and it was just fun. It's a good exercise. I've watched even my kids' youth practices, like how those coaches are managing, the kids. Are they getting repetition? Are they maximizing their time? There's nothing worse than a coach saying, hey, we're going to practice for 2.5 hours. And you're like sitting there looking at the reps, and the kids aren't getting reps. It's like, you're like, I don't mind you practice for a long period of time, but how efficient is that time? You can do all that in an hour and 45 minutes. You don't need 2.5 hours. You're just inefficient, as a coach, and I think that's why I love the convention, because I think that, younger coaches can go there and, hear, some experienced coaches talk about how to maximize time, how to get efficiency out of drills. And I think that's really, but yeah, I mean, as far as like what I learned at Robert Morris, I started recruiting Canadian kids. We had 17 Canadians on the team. So we really did restructure every thought that we ever had about the game. Just watching the box game, I was like, this game's really different. And we have to think outside the box about, concepts. And Drew was on my staff, McMinn, who's currently the head coach, who was young. He just came out of Providence College. And, some days I'd lock us into for, 4 or 5 hours. And I'm not kidding. Like that, literally, we just we're not leaving till we figure this out.
Right.
And we have to figure this out. And I'd take my football background and say, well, this is how plays are designed in football. This is the concept in football. How do we translate this to lacrosse? And, how do we take those analytics of third down and long? This is our play sets. How do we, how do we take this and transfer it over? So, yeah, he was excellent, at taking a concept that, maybe we talk about and then developing it into something that we could quantify on at a practice, or put into a playbook. And he still is, we still have great conversations and talk about those things.
You've been quoted in a couple of stories that at the end of Robert Morris, there were more cons than pros. And I asked the question twofold: how do you get to that point? You're a Division I coach. You've turned a program into a very successful model, and then you just kind of decide what's next. So is it the opportunity, looking to the next opportunity, or I don't want to say you get bored easily, but how do you end up with more cons when you're division? People would kill for that job.
Yeah, and I think I would, if I was getting, let's just say, if I was getting compensated for, at the rate that my peers were,
okay,
I'd probably still be there.
Okay.
I love the campus. I love the people there. My staff was great. The players were incredible. They still are. It's funny. I can walk campus right now, or walk out to practice, and the coaching staff there, Brandon Mangan, Drew, and his whole staff, and those players, they're the same kids that we were coaching back then. It's a culture that is incredible. But I had just had my third kid, and
I don't get that.
And I wasn't home. I was, in order for a Robert Morris, people understand, in order for a Robert Morris to compete at a level like that, you have to be on the road 3 times longer and more than other coaches. The ACC coaches, whatever. You have to, you're digging through scrap piles, to find diamonds, and then there's one, and it's just like that. But that drive to continue to, how do we keep competing? We beat Penn State, we beat Ohio State, we're playing number 3 North Carolina down to the wire, and then when your administration says, great job, we can give you a 3% raise off your $34,000. I mean, I was the lowest paid second assistant in the CAA, as a head coach. And you're not in Maryland where you can do a lacrosse camp and all of a sudden you can make it all up, right? I had worked hard to build a staff from it, because you have to win with people, right? And so I went from part-time to GA to full-time.
Right.
Well, during my push to help, backfill all these assistant positions, my increments were like $500 a year, like, so it was, it was just kind of tough. It's like, you know what's going to take for the program to be successful. And while you're doing that, maybe you're overlooking what it's going to take for you as an individual to be successful. And then finally, I just really could not look my wife in the eyes and be like, this is worth it. Like, I'm living the dream, but as a family, we're not living the dream.
Right.
And that's when, I had to come to the realization that, I had to move in a different direction.
I was a GA on a football at a major university, and I had to choose between journalism and being a football coach. And journalism actually paid the rent. So sometimes practicality comes through the door. I'm curious to know one thing, though, as you're moving humanity to find these diamonds, when you finally get to one, and in a general sense, are the kids you're talking to at this point, are they happy that somebody showed up, and because they're finally being recognized, or are they more reticent because, well, it's not North Carolina, it's only Robert Morris? I'm curious when you find those kids.
We found kids all over though. Like we had 7 different states and 3 different, regions of, we had Providences in Canada. Is that how you say Providence? I don't know, whatever they call their crazy situations up there. But we had Alberta, we had, Ontario, we had, BC kids from all over. And I think that, what we found with the Canadian kids was they just wanted an opportunity. And quite frankly, the visa process and the academics was so crucial. Like our admissions in the international admissions office, they were actually the backbone of our success, like because of their ability to work so well with the families. And then, once our business department became internationally accredited, that was vital, because, our Canadians were 3.5. A lot of them were like 3.5 students, like they're incredible students. So those things were crucial in that. Plus we had hockey, so they knew a lot of those kids. Our soccer coach was Canadian, so they had some Canadian kids on the soccer team. So it's really difficult when you recruit one Canadian, because your international office is like someone in your admissions office who's just going to try to handle a visa for the first time, and that can be miserable experience. And then when that kid has a miserable experience, he goes back home and everybody knows he had a miserable experience. And that ends the recruiting for Canadian kids at that university. Right. That's like where it dies. So, I feel like, and then we found some diamonds, like instead of maybe getting we had some MIA kids down in Maryland, but, we get Westminster or we get Urbana, like some of your non-traditional, maybe we had, didn't get the Brother Rice kid, but, we get, the Troy kid, or, it's like just trying to find these athletes at, schools that maybe aren't the brand name, quote unquote, schools.
Who opened up the Canadian border to you guys? I mean, what made you want to go north, especially with 17 kids? That's a lot of kids in a program.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. When I first got there, Derek Scully, the hockey coach there, was him and I shared an office because our offices weren't done or whatever. And Derek and literally our chairs were like back to back almost. His desk was right behind mine, and then it was like one of these days where he's like reaches over his shoulder. He's like, "Hey, you might want to look at this kid." He's like, "He wants to play hockey, or I'm not sure he can play hockey." He's like, "But looks like he play lacrosse." I start reading. I was like, "Andrew Watt, U19 Canadian team." I was like, "Well, yeah." I was like, so I called Andrew up, and he ended up coming being our league scorer for 4 years. He did play practice squad for hockey for like that winter. He helped them out. But Waddy was great. He was excellent, had a great career in the NLL, and he opened up a lot of doors for us. But we brought a couple guys in that year, and then they had a good experience. And they were friends with some of the guys on the hockey team, and those guys would just go home and really Robert Morris. It took us the same amount of time to drive to St. Catharines as it did Baltimore. Right. So it's not as far. It's not far. It's a good. That's what we sold people. I'm like, you can be here. You can be here in no time. Oh,
I grew up I was one of those kids that grew up as a box kid. So that's how when somebody asked me about, lacrosse here to start helping out with the local program, I asked them where the rink was, and I've said this 100 times. I asked where the rink was, and they said we play on a field. And I said, you better show me a book because I have no idea what you're talking about. So I certainly get that. So from Robert Morris, obviously, to a real job as an associate athletic director with a real salary at probably one of the best lacrosse high school programs in the country at Archbishop Spalding. Is that a fair characterization?
Definitely the best. Definitely the best conference in the country. The MIA, I still would argue, to anyone it's one of the best conferences. And I think that right now, the way it's trending, I think Spalding is trending in that direction of being one of the best, programs. Brian Phipps came in after myself, and I think he took the program, one step further than where, we had it. I think we were building a decent foundation, there. And then when Phipps came in there, he just, I think he just continued to do a great job. They're competing at a high level. They just beat Malvern. I think he's got the right idea there for sure. But he's from the area. I do believe it's one of those areas that it's definitely a better area to be if you're from there. I think for outsiders to come in there, it can be different. It can be a little different.
I have an athletic director question for you. I think that athletic administrators in high schools, and maybe this is also true in college. I'm an old guy. I'm 66. In the old days, generally speaking, athletic directors were retired coaches. So they knew what it was like to go through the process. The new guys who come out with athletic administration degrees can tell you all about how you're supposed to make sure Bobby feels good about being cut, but they can't get the buses to run on time. And there's some core things as an athletic director that they need to do, but somewhere athletic direction in the world of high school and college athletics has gone from ADs supporting coaches against parents to now siding with parents against coaches. And I'm wondering, from somebody who sat in that chair, if you think that that's a remote or even a reasonable thought.
Well, my situation at Spalding was pretty unique. Jeff Parsons was the head AD, and then I was the associate AD, which is pretty unique to most scenarios. So we kind of divided and conquered certain things. Jeff did a lot of. We had another assistant at AD, and they handled all the operations. I mean, for a private Catholic school, we had 52 teams. I mean, we had 7 some odd fields going on. I mean, it literally was it was crazy zoo, like buses, 5 buses every day going out. So dividing and conquering was definitely, I started a sports management program because it is a trending, it's a trending major, of course, and just trying to find kids and cultivate kids and prepare them for if they want, like myself, who wanted to be in the sports. So we started using students to help administrate, games, whether it was keeping score or set up, tear down, just giving them those experiences. We had a Jumbotron, just training kids on how to use a Jumbotron and get those skill sets. I did facility enhancements, where identify areas of need, whether it was storage, equipment. I really, honestly, because I was a coach, I probably stayed out of a little bit of the parent involvement. Jeff dealt more with that. And yeah, we definitely met several times and we would discuss each case, like which one's more the parent of the kid or more the coach. But we did also go evaluate practices. So I sat and watched a lot of practices, and just see how the interaction was. That was something that we were big on, was just, watching, we did professional development, for our coaches. We give them feedback from watching their practices. I think Jeff did a really good job of having a pulse on, his coaches and who had good relationships and who he had to watch. And I just tried to backfill, try to give him my 2 cents, when I could, and say, hey, they're doing some good stuff, or maybe we need to coach them up a little bit, and help them out, but yeah, my role was a little unique as the athletic director there.
And I'm asking the question because as a bunch of older coaches who share beers once in a while on Friday, there's this conversation. We become more isolated as programs, meaning if my high school program, I do my own scheduling, I'm going to do my own fundraising. I present the athletic director with the package completed with whatever paperwork I've got to do for him, and his job is done. So he leaves me alone because he's just happy that everything's been taken care of. And he knows it's in good hands, and and I don't have to get into the political discussions about this, that, or the other. And it really has changed. And I'm not suggesting that parents shouldn't have a point, but ADs in this world are put into really difficult situations because they've got to hold the line with schools, yet they still got to make sure that they're dealing with some parents who sometimes don't always have realistic ideas.
No, it's good because I'm an assistant coach here at Hilliard Davidson with the girls, and the AD here, the assistant AD I went to high school with, and the head AD. I mean, he knows I'm a former AD, so it's just kind of it's kind of funny because I can chat with those guys at a different angle because I'm not a head coach. I don't deal with parents. I honestly I just leave practice and I go get my car and I go home. But, I can chat with these guys, I think, just from the perspective of being in their shoes before.
Right.
And I don't envy them at all. I mean, but they do an excellent job here, I think. I think they manage the parents, the booster clubs, the coaches. I mean, for how massive our district is and our school in particular, they oversee middle school all the way up. And, as much as I like to bust their stones sometimes, I too appreciate everything that they're doing and for our kids. I got kids in the district and really at the end of the day, I think if the AD genuinely cares about supporting his coaches equally and the experience of the kids, they're going to win. They're going to figure it out. And it's when they're tired, or broken, that's when it gets tough for them. I think really tough.
Right.
But and you could talk to an AD. It only takes like 5-10 minutes to figure it out. Where they're sitting. But I've being around these guys here, it's been real fortunate for me to be on the other side. Like I said, new perspective.
I use Bo Schembechler as an example of how it wouldn't work today and how the landscape's changed. Bo Schembechler was 3-9 in Rose Bowls. If he was coaching today, that wouldn't be the same thing. He also made $290,000 in his last year, unlike the coach there now, who's managing a $20 million program. So high school head coaches in college have become more CEOs necessarily than they've become coaches. The builders of men and grabbing a face mask and telling a kid do this, that, and the other thing. There's a portal. They transfer. So it becomes a much different world, and I get all those things. The question for you is June of 13, Ohio Machine comes calling. Now, you still got your foot in Maryland at this point. So who made the call to you for the Ohio Machine, and how did that start?
Yeah, it was, I think it might have been my first summer maybe it was my first summer at Spalding. And I had camps, I had my teams all lined up to go to tournaments and we were all ready to go. And then John Algie, the president at the time, had called me and he said, "Hey, look, we're not trending in the right direction. I may need your help." I was like, "Well, what do you need? You need an offensive coordinator, like what?" He's like, No. He's like, "I want you to consider taking over the team." I was like, "Ooh," I got a tough schedule ahead of me the next 2 weeks. I just got to Spalding. I was like, I can't bail on these, I'm not doing that. I got to take these kids to these tournaments and I want to take them. I got to get to, I got to get this program elevated. He said, "Well, give it a couple weeks, when your tournament schedule dies down." I was like, "Okay." And we said, "Well, if we're still in need of a coach at that point, when I'm done with my tournaments, like 2 weeks, it was only like 2 weeks." I was like, and then, we'll chat. So at the end of the tournament, it was a Saturday or whatever. I go watch the Machine play at Denver, and Denver blows their doors off. I mean, it's like 19 to like 5 or 6. I don't know. It was ridiculous. And so right after the game, my phone rings. "All right, you ready to take over this team?" I was like, "All right." I was like, it gave me a couple weeks to watch film too and just learn the game and
Right.
see if it's something that I was even capable in my mind of doing. So yeah, that's when I talked to the administration at Spalding and said, "Hey, I think I can manage this, fairly well. It's all summer, and quite frankly, my summer I can manage that, so it worked out really well."
So then we go from the next summer. Obviously, it becomes a full-time job at some point. So you got to leave Maryland, and
Yeah.
that's when it takes off. And I go back to the original story. We're back taking over a program nobody wants, and you turn it into a championship. So you have a pattern of taking a lot of stuff that nobody does want. If you ask I've said this a couple times on the show. I've asked Kevin Corrigan. I said, when did Notre Dame become a great job? He said, the day I took over. And I love that confidence that he had, because the fact was that he knew where he was going to go.
Yeah.
So now you've had this experience, and I'm going to tell you, I've taken over a number of programs that nobody wanted, and you work hard at it. So I have great respect. It's easy to walk in and coach. I went from a public high school to a St. Mary's to a private school that had this terrible record, and I had all these Division I kids. I just got out of the way. It wasn't a great coach. I just had better athletes. But now we get to the Ohio Machine situation, and now you have this experience, and man, you turn this thing into a juggernaut.
Yeah, it worked out really well. I had great support with John Algie. I mean, he allowed me to build a vision, and as a GM head coach, he, I wasn't GM. He was a president and GM. And I just told him my recipe. This is what I think it's going to take for us, to get to where we need. And then he'd go find resources and then come back. And, he allowed me to hire Tom, Mariano, which I brought on board. I had Billy on staff. So I had some great coaches around me. And then I had Dom Marzano, who's at Capital now, so again, just collectively, you win with people. We had a good locker room too. I mean, we had some good pieces of that puzzle, but we had some things missing. So it was just a matter of making sure that we were getting the right pieces in.
When you build at that level, do you build from the locker room out or from the field, from the talent in?
Well, it was a combo. Ted Garber was there before me, and I think him and John did a good job of getting some talent in there. I think the game had changed. Ted was very free flow, kind of, and he let John do a lot with bringing in the talent. I don't know if there was really I think that's why John was so hardcore on me about building a model, because maybe that's not what Ted had done. And no discredit to him. I think when he had coached college, the game was different. When it was a little bit more roll out the ball, give, some concepts and let the boys play. Where now the college players that were coming out are a little bit more like, hey, what's my role? What do I do? What's my job? That was the piece that I thought was missing. I was like, oh, we have all these great pieces, but I'm not sure any of them know what their particular role is within this, machine, pun intended. And then that's where Tommy and myself and Dom and the staff, and then, down the road is Daryl Delia and Nat, just all great coaches, great minds, and Billy. We just started placing guys, giving them specific roles. Hey, you're really, really good at this. We need you to do 2 things at a high level. Don't need you to do 5 things. 2 things. Just do your job, and we're all going to be a great team. And the guys bought into that concept. They really just bought in and did their job. And we watched film. We broke down film. We sent out clips. I mean, we're doing stuff like you're accustomed to doing in the collegiate level, and just a lot of passion for that. But then we knew we were young, so we had to bring in some guys like Kyle Harrison, or some veteran presence and leadership guys that can look at in rough, tough situations. Look at a guy like Kyle, a calming presence. We're gonna be fine. And I think all those ingredients were important.
You look at somebody like Marcus Holman, whose father's a coach, so he certainly understands the locker room aspect of what you're trying to do, and I think it makes the job easier. Scott Rogers was your goalie. You had some serious talent. That's why you won a championship. Did you increase the offensive and defensive knowledge at that level? Was it a new learning experience? One of the questions I asked Bill, I said, you're a high school coach, and all of a sudden you walk onto a pro field. You have to tell me there was at least some hesitancy that first hour, and as he pointed out, he says the first week, yeah, you're a little nervous because you're not exactly sure how people are going to accept it. That's true of any high school kid that goes to a college program or any college pro, that's drafted in any pro sport. So did you have that hesitancy early, or was it just a matter of just kind of going in and putting your head down?
Well, the one of the things was just like talking to them. It's a business. So at the just like any employee, you got to talk to them. Straight. Be straight and forward with them. Like where the pros, cons, where the goals are, where we want to be, and I think that was the important thing that we talked about as a staff was make sure that we're communicating. A lot of the guys that came to us from some other teams said the communication was one of the things that they felt like it could have been better. So we tried to make sure that we did a decent level of that, making sure that guys understood their role and communicate that. And then when they weren't doing that, it's like goes back to jumping on the phone. Sometimes after I scheduled 4-minute calls. Like 4 minute. Just go through the roster and say, "Here's your time slot. I'm calling you at this time," and give guys 4 or 5 minutes to say whatever they want to say. Like it just to give open opportunities. They respect that. I think once you earn the guys' respect in that area, and they just want to be told, like, "Hey, we're cutting you, and this is why we're cutting you."
Right.
Like they understand it's a big boy league. Like everyone has they have life. There's a life expectancy for each one of us.
Right.
So
Well,
just want to be told why.
It's Moneyball. You want 6 to the chest and bleed out, or you want 1 to the head? So there's some truth to making it straight and making it honest, and it gives you some respect from them because you're not messing with their livelihoods.
Right.
There's been all kinds of written conversations or all kind of written stories about the demise of. When did you find out that the Ohio Machine went? Was it a phone call and that it was no longer going to exist?
I think we had heard rumblings that Florida was probably in trouble. At some level. Never thought that the Machine would be in trouble, but then it all kind of came out that that night before, that the announcement came out that there's a good chance that all 3 of Jim Davis's teams were going to be dissolved. So it was quite frankly, it was a pretty big surprise. Like because we had done some positive things. We had a stadium. We had everything was going a good direction. So yeah, we kind of almost found out when everybody else did.
I don't want to get into the depth of it because we've already talked a little bit about your feelings, and I don't think that is a big thing. But I would ask you, just from your expertise, looking in, the PLL comes along, the MLL now is part of that whole process. You can play in the summer and still play inside in the NLL. Just some general thoughts on where professional lacrosse is going.
Well, they're definitely doing some some positive things. I mean, like I think the interaction, the social media, the availability to watch the games. They got quality coaches, the best players. So it's as long as people are still butts in seats and people are watching it, it's in a good place. If guys can make a living doing it, if they can get some health insurance, if they can get paid, if they can use their name and their branding to go out and make some side coin, in their camps, their clinics, their ventures. I think it's all positive.
If the phone rang, would you go back to the pros?
I think if it was the right situation, like I enjoyed it. One thing about being in Ohio is that half of my games were here. So that's one thing is that changes. Now with the PLL model, you're never home maybe once. When we play in Ohio, so there's some things to be considered, but it would have to be the right fit for sure.
I have great respect for somebody who thinks dad is more important than being a coach, and I think that's what the model you followed personally. Is that fair?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy coaching. And I enjoy watching my kids and helping my kids. So it's like people ask me, you get that itch, it's like, I love coaching 3rd graders, love coaching the high school girls, love coaching the pros, college Division I, whatever. It's like, if you just love coaching, like you can get that itch, you can cure that itch, just by being in the now and who you're coaching.
The last question, what's next?
My daughter's going to college to play, and my son's an 8th grader and he's coming up through. So, it's probably, I love the box game. We're doing a ton of stuff here with the box game in Columbus. Want to continue, to coach box, and probably be transitioning, and that my daughter will be graduating over to the boys. And helping out, build the program where it all started for me. I mean, they've got some great, new coaching staff this year, and Coach Burns is over there as a defense coordinator who I've known for a long time, and Kevin Burns, and then Dave Ames is the head coach who I coached, our boys and youth for years, and he's an excellent head coach. So I look forward to that. But I mean, I definitely have enjoyed my run with our girls. They're a great bunch of human beings, and they're fun to be around, and they work hard. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's just whatever comes my way.
Well, Ken, I wanted to thank you for your time. I'm going to be one of the last guys to call you Ken.
Like who?
Yeah. Who's that guy? Bear, I really appreciate all you've done for Lacrosse, and this time you spent. This has been a really fun conversation. We have some mutual friends, but you've meant a lot to the sport, and you've done a lot for the sport, and that'll continue. So, on behalf of all the folks who watch the show, we appreciate you coming aboard. And
thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. And then, just maybe we'll have to get you over on our Lax Farmer Coach Bear show. It's that's one other thing I've been doing. I didn't get a chance to mention, but Mike Sportini, who put that show together, used to run MLL radio, and he called me and he said, "Hey, do you want to do a show?" And there's so many podcasts out there, but I think it's awesome because there's it just helps grow the game in a different way. It allows to expose some people that have been great in the game. And so, yeah, I appreciate what you do for sure. Thanks, Greg, for having me.